My name is Alex Carter, and the night my brother laughed at me was the night something inside me finally broke. He looked straight at me across the table, that smug grin I'd known since childhood. Still pretending to be in the army? Alex, come on. We all know you just guarded parking lots. Everyone laughed. Even my mother tried to hide a smile behind her glass. I just sat there, frozen, every word carving into the part of me that had bled for this country, the part they never cared to see. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Because one day soon, when a 4-star general would stand and salute me before them all, they'd understand exactly who they'd been laughing at. The clinking of silverware filled the dining room, that polite sound masking years of distance. My mother sat at the head of the table, smiling the way Southern mothers do when they're trying to keep peace at any cost. Across from me, Ryan lifted his wineglass like a man making a toast to himself. His voice carried over the hum of small talk. "So, Alex," he said casually, "you still doing that army thing?" My mother's eyes brightened. "Oh, yes, dear. Are you still working for them?" Before I could answer, Ryan chuckled. "Working? You mean guarding a gate somewhere? Don't tell me you still wear the uniform. Come on, sis." The table erupted in laughter, polite, nervous, genuine, all at once. Forks hit plates. Someone poured more wine. No one stopped him. No one ever did. I didn't move, didn't speak. My gaze met his across the table, steady, measured, almost calm. He smiled wider, thinking he'd won. He always mistook silence for surrender. The weight of that moment pressed on me, heavier than the metals I'd locked away years ago. I reached for my glass, fingers brushing against the paracord bracelet on my wrist. Faded, frayed, stubbornly intact. A ghost of another life pulsed beneath my skin. The sound of a distant explosion. The face of someone I hadn't spoken of since that night. Ryan poured himself another drink, satisfied with the laughter he'd earned. I raised my glass, voice low enough for only him to hear. "There are things, Ryan," I said evenly, "you'll never be qualified to understand." His smile faltered. Mine didn't. I set the glass down, stood, and stepped out to the porch. The air smelled of salt and rain. Across the Ashley River, the moon rippled on the dark water. Quiet, untouchable, and stronger for it. Afghanistan, 2008. The heat had teeth that night, and the sky burned orange with tracer fire. My unit had been ordered to pull back, communication lost, casualties mounting. Then, through the chaos, I heard it. A voice, young, terrified. "Help! Somebody's still in there!" Every instinct said to keep moving, but something stronger pulled me back. I ran toward the wreckage of a burning armored vehicle, the air thick with smoke and sand. Inside, a soldier was trapped, his uniform half burned, his face barely visible beneath blood and soot. I dragged him out just as the second explosion hit. The blast threw me onto the gravel, ears ringing, world spinning. When I opened my eyes, he was breathing, barely, but alive. His name tag caught the last flicker of light before going dark. Evan Dalton, by dawn. I was evacuated with shrapnel in my shoulder, and one ear deafened. The mission, Echo Valley, was classified within hours. The Pentagon sealed every report, no medals, no records, just silence. I was debriefed, thanked quietly, then told never to speak of it again. Evan was sent home. His father, General Charles Dalton, requested the name of the officer who saved his son. He was told only, "Major Carter." Years later, I left active duty for a quiet job in defense consulting. My family never asked what I really did. They wouldn't have believed it anyway. They assumed I shuffled papers. At night, I still hear the explosion, still touch the paracord bracelet scorched that day. It reminds me of courage, loss, and the silence that came after. But their laughter, their disbelief, hurts in ways no battlefield ever did. The Charleston night was calm, almost too calm. The wind off the Cooper River carried the faint smell of salt and rain. Inside my rented house, the only light came from my laptop screen. I started to type, "Sir." I still remember that night in Echo Valley. The cursor blinked, waiting for more, but my hands froze above the keys. What was I even hoping for? Gratitude? Closure? Neither had ever come easy for soldiers like me. I sat back, staring at the words until they blurred, then deleted them one by one. The letter disappeared, just as the mission had. Some things were meant to stay buried with the men who never made it back. I was about to shut the computer when my phone rang. Unknown number. The voice on the other end was low, deliberate, unmistakably military. "Major Carter, this is General Dalton. I heard you're in Charleston. I'll be attending your mother's celebration this weekend." I didn't speak for several seconds. My throat went dry. That dinner, the same one where Ryan mocked me, was about to become something else entirely. After he hung up, I stood by the window. The river shimmered beneath the moonlight, the tide rising and falling like a pulse. Somewhere deep down, I knew it. Whatever peace I'd made with the past was about to end. The truth was coming back. And this time, it wouldn't stay silent. Morning sunlight crept through the lace curtains of my father's old house, the one Ryan now proudly called his own. The walls still smelled faintly of cigar smoke and varnish, as if the years hadn't dared to move them. Above the fireplace hung his portrait, crisp uniform, stern gaze, medals shining like they had never dulled. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, "La. Cole. Thomas Carter, a true soldier, a true man." The word man glinted as if it had been freshly polished. It was his gospel. He'd said it often enough while I was growing up. How real soldiers were men. How women belonged behind the lines. Not in them. I could still hear his voice the day I enlisted at 18. "The battlefield isn't for girls. Alex, you'll never understand what service means." He didn't come to my graduation. Didn't write when I deployed. The last time he saw me in uniform, he just shook his head and muttered, "In this family, only men know honor." Ryan inherited that belief like a family heirloom and wielded it as naturally as breathing. He walked in while on the phone, signing papers on the kitchen counter. His tie loosened like he owned the place, and maybe he did. "Mom's talking about leaving the beach house to me," he said. "I'm planning to turn it into a veterans memorial. You should pitch in, for the family's honor." I leaned against the doorway. "Whose honor exactly?" He looked up, that cool Carter smile never leaving his face. "The kind earned by men who actually fought, not people who wore a uniform for the photo ops." My hand brushed the old steel helmet on the shelf, dust coating the rim. The silence between us stretched until it hummed. "You've never heard bullets fly past your head, Ryan," I said quietly. "You only hear applause." He smiled thinly. "And you only hear keyboards clacking in an office." I didn't reply. The helmet in my hand felt heavier than I remembered. I set it down, turned, and headed for the door. But as I stepped onto the porch, something on the table caught my eye. A cream-colored envelope sealed with gold trim. For the memorial banquet, Saturday, and just below that line, the printed words froze my breath. "Guest of honor, General Charles Dalton." The air felt suddenly thin. Of all people, of all nights, he was coming. The man who knew exactly what I'd done, and what Ryan would never understand. The ballroom of the Charleston Veterans Hall shimmered under chandeliers, polished and proud. The kind of place my family loved to be seen. Rows of round tables, crisp linens, the faint scent of champagne and ambition. Over 100 guests, local business leaders, reporters, retired officers. Ryan thrived in it, shaking hands, basking in the kind of attention he'd always needed like oxygen. I sat near the back, my black suit simple, unadorned. The medal that mattered most stayed hidden in my pocket, at the front. A large portrait of my father dominated the stage, eyes cold even in oil paint. Ryan took the microphone. "The Carter family has always stood for strength and service," he began, his voice full of practiced pride. "My father fought with honor, I continue that legacy through my work. And now, my son, Ethan, will soon join the Pentagon team. 3 generations of true dedication. The crowd applauded. Then he turned, gaze finding me. And my sister, well, she also worked in the army once. Mostly behind a desk, I think. Someone has to handle the paperwork, right? Laughter rippled through the room. Someone clapped too loudly. Another whistled low. My mother sat frozen, her painted smile trembling. I felt my pulse in my ears, steady but sharp. I wanted to stand, to say something, anything. But then Echo Valley flashed before me, the smoke, the screams, the men who never made it home. Their silence deserved more than my anger. So I stayed seated, hands clasped, jaw locked. The light from the windows caught on the edge of the metal inside my pocket. A brief glint no one noticed. When Ryan stepped down, shaking hands with donors, an older man in a veteran's pin brushed past my chair. He paused, studying me. "Major Carter?" he whispered. "Echo Valley?" I stiffened. Before I could answer, someone called him away. He leaned to the man beside him and murmured, "She's the one!" My heartbeat stumbled. The noise in the hall faded. Somebody knew. Then the MC's voice broke through the hum. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest of honor, General Charles Dalton." I looked up as the doors opened. A tall figure entered, uniform gleaming, hair silver under the lights. Ryan straightened his tie, a smile spreading across his face as he stepped forward to greet him. And in that instant, I knew everything that had been buried in silence was about to surface, right here, in front of everyone who'd ever laughed at me. The doors opened, and the room stilled. Silver medals caught the light as General Charles Dalton stepped inside. Posture sharp, eyes scanning, Ryan lit up instantly, striding forward. "General Dalton, I'm Ryan Carter, host of tonight's event. What an honor, sir." Dalton nodded once, his gaze drifting past him. Ryan grabbed the microphone, voice loud and proud. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Dalton, a hero of our nation." Applause burst across the room. "General," Ryan added smugly, "you'll be pleased to know the Carter family has its own military legacy." Dalton's reply was cool. "I'm aware, Mr. Carter." Then his eyes locked on me. The noise faded. He walked slowly through the crowd, every step echoing like a drumbeat. When he stopped in front of me, I rose instinctively. And then, he saluted. The air froze. My mother gasped. Ryan's smile died mid-breath. "Major Alex Carter," Dalton said, voice ringing clear. "Ma'am, it's been far too long." I returned the salute, steady and unshaken. One by one, veterans around the hall stood and did the same, until half the room was on its feet. Dalton lowered his hand, turning toward the stage. "If you don't mind," he said calmly, "I'd like to say a few words." Dalton's voice filled the silence. 18 years ago, during a mission called Echo Valley, my unit was ambushed. I almost lost my son. He paused, eyes sweeping the crowd. One officer went back, alone, through fire. She carried him out, saving 12 others. That officer is here tonight. He turned to me. "Major Alex Carter, the bravest soldier I've ever known." Applause thundered. Ryan stared, pale and speechless. "Alex, why didn't you tell us?" "Because you never listened," I said quietly. Dalton stepped down, shaking my hand. "I owed you this." "You owed it to the ones who didn't make it." Facing the crowd, he raised his voice. "To every soldier who was doubted or forgotten, tonight, we remember." He saluted again. The whole room followed, and for the first time in years, the silence inside me finally broke. The applause still echoed long after General Dalton finished speaking. He stepped down from the stage, the sound of his boots steady against the marble floor. Every eye followed him as he crossed the room toward me. The air felt too still, too fragile to breathe in. He stopped in front of me, tall, solemn, every inch of him still the soldier he'd always been. Then he extended his hand. "Without your courage, my son wouldn't be alive," he said quietly. "And I wouldn't be standing here." He turned to the crowd, his voice rising. "You may have forgotten her name, but history hasn't." The hall erupted. Chairs scraped. Veterans rose to their feet, saluting in unison. The light from the chandeliers caught the silver medal pinned to my jacket, casting a glint across the room. Amid the thunder of applause, Ryan sat frozen, his earlier arrogance gone, replaced by something small and colorless. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. Peace washed over me like calm water after years of storm. It wasn't pride, it was release. Dalton leaned closer, his tone low and sincere. "You've carried silence long enough. Major, the world should know." "The world knowing was never the point," I whispered. When I finally walked out of that hall, I felt weightless, not victorious, just free. After 17 years, silence had finally done its job. The hall had emptied, leaving only the faint echo of applause and the quiet tap of rain against the windows. I stood near the exit, coat draped over my arm, ready to step back into the night. That's when I heard footsteps. Slow, hesitant, unfamiliar in their weight. Ryan stopped a few feet away, shoulders slumped, his confidence stripped bare. For the first time in years, he didn't look like the man who always had something clever to say. "Alex, I didn't know," he said softly. "None of us did." I met his eyes, steady and calm. "You didn't want to know, Ryan. You believed what made you feel bigger." He looked down, the truth landing heavier than any accusation I could have thrown. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the soft rhythm of rain. Then, barely audible, he whispered, "I'm sorry." I shook my head, my voice quiet but firm. "I didn't serve for your apology. I served for the country that gave us both the right to stand here." The words cut through the air, clean, final, without cruelty. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, I turned toward the window. Outside, the American flag snapped in the wind, soaked but unyielding, its colors vivid even under the storm. That sight settled something inside me. I didn't need his understanding, or his regret. What mattered was knowing I had never betrayed who I was. When I turned back, Ryan was already walking away, head bowed, the echo of his footsteps fading into the rain. I smiled, just slightly, not from triumph, but from peace. There was no victory to claim, only the quiet freedom that comes when you finally stop carrying the weight of being misunderstood. That night, I drove along the quiet Charleston coast. The sea stretched out like dark glass, the air sharp with salt. The storm had passed, leaving the sky bruised but calm. Streetlights flickered along the boardwalk, their reflections trembling on wet asphalt. It felt as if the whole city was breathing slower, resting after holding its breath for too long. I pulled over near the dunes and walked down to the sand, shoes in hand. The wind carried the sound of waves breaking in rhythm, steady, certain, unbothered by human noise. Sitting there, I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small metal box. Inside was an old photograph of 3 faces I would never see again, and beside it, the silver medal that had survived both fire and silence. I placed them gently on the damp sand where the waves could reach. The water rolled in, kissed the edges, and slipped away. My phone buzzed. A new email from General Charles Dalton, subject, Veterans Recovery Program. "We're launching it next month. I want you to lead it." A quiet smile tugged at my lips. Even now, he was still honoring the unspoken, the kind of strength that didn't demand attention. The wind rose, carrying the echo of my father's voice. "Only men understand honor." I looked toward the horizon and whispered, "You were wrong, Dad. Honor never cared about gender." I stood, letting the waves swirl around my feet. The paracord bracelet, the last remnant of Echo Valley, slipped loose. caught the moonlight once, and drifted out to sea. I didn't reach for it. Some memories aren't meant to be held forever. The moon hung over the water, its reflection glimmering against the metal, still in my palm. I breathed deeply, the air tasting clean for the first time in years. The country remembers, I murmured, a smile breaking through. Even when family forgets. The tide rolled in, soft and endless, erasing my footprints one by one, and the night closed in, peaceful, proud, and utterly free, 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 and utterly free,